The biggest story from Silverstone wasn't Max Verstappen's crash. It was the contract clause that quietly became mathematically unavoidable. Sitting 78 points behind second place with only Belgium and Hungary before the summer break, Verstappen can no longer climb into the top two. That single number may have unlocked his 2027 exit, and suddenly, every word from Red Bull and McLaren sounds very different.
One time, okay, but 2 times, it's becoming dangerous for myself.
Silverstone wasn't simply another disappointing weekend for Red Bull. It was the moment months of technical decline, political instability, and driver frustration finally collided. Ever since Adrian Newey's departure, the team has been fighting a war on multiple fronts, losing key personnel, adapting to a brand new power unit program, and attempting to rebuild its technical identity under Laurent Mekies. Meanwhile, reports of a June meeting between McLaren executives and Verstappen's representatives refused to disappear, even as both camps carefully avoided confirming anything outright. But there's a catch. What the teams aren't telling us is that this story is no longer driven by rumours. It's driven by leverage. Verstappen's exit clause is now reportedly active. Red Bull has apologised publicly for repeated technical failures, and McLaren suddenly has the strongest negotiating position on the grid. If the relationship inside Milton Keynes is genuinely beginning to fracture, has Formula One just witnessed the first move in the biggest driver transfer of the decade? Before we move on, make sure to smash that like button and hit subscribe so you never miss out on any of our latest videos. Because once we connect the contract clause, the rear wing failures, and the private negotiations, the real power struggle inside Formula One becomes impossible to ignore. Let's begin with the one fact almost everyone overlooked. Verstappen didn't become frustrated because he finished outside the podium. He became frustrated because Silverstone confirmed something far more dangerous than a bad result. It confirmed Red Bull's problems are no longer isolated incidents. They're becoming a pattern. Look at the timeline. In Austria, Verstappen suffered a frightening accident at turn 9 after the team's experimental flip-around rear wing failed to restore airflow quickly enough after closing. 1 week later, at Silverstone's ultra-fast Stowe corner, almost exactly the same behaviour returned. Different circuit, same symptom, same consequence. At well over 230 km per hour, the rear of the RB22 suddenly lost stability when aerodynamic load failed to recover as expected. That's not simply bad luck, that's engineering correlation. For Formula One engineers, repeating a failure under different circuit conditions is often worse than discovering a completely new problem, because it proves the weakness exists inside the design philosophy rather than inside the setup window. Now, combine that with Verstappen's own radio. He wasn't simply angry, he sounded defeated. After another frightening moment, he described the car as dangerous and admitted he was fed up. Those aren't the words of a driver complaining about balance. Those are the words of someone questioning whether the organisation still understands its own machine. Then came perhaps the most revealing political detail of the entire weekend. Before the Grand Prix even started, Verstappen reportedly asked Red Bull to abandon the existing setup completely, fit different specifications, accept a pit lane start, and effectively sacrifice track position in exchange for a car he could actually trust. Think about what that means. Drivers hate giving away track position. World champions hate it even more. Yet Verstappen believes starting last was preferable to driving the package his engineers had prepared. Red Bull rejected the request. Technically, Laurent Mekies later defended the decision by pointing out Verstappen was running inside the podium positions before retiring. On paper, that sounds perfectly reasonable. But Formula One isn't decided on paper. It's decided by confidence. and confidence between driver and engineering group may now be the most valuable currency inside Red Bull Racing. Notice something else. This isn't the first time Verstappen has publicly suggested that his technical feedback wasn't fully respected. Back in Canada, he openly admitted the team had ignored his preferred setup direction, before eventually discovering he had been correct. His response was brutally revealing. "I've pointed it out so many times. Sometimes they have to find out themselves." That sentence tells us something extraordinary. The communication loop inside Red Bull appears to be slowing down. Championship-winning organisations normally operate almost like fighter squadrons. Driver feedback reaches engineering instantly. Engineers adapt. Performance improves. Instead, Verstappen increasingly sounds like someone whose warnings are entering a committee meeting. That's a dangerous transformation. Now, add another layer. According to reports from the Netherlands, Gianpiero Lambiase, Verstappen's longtime race engineer, and arguably the person who translates Max's extraordinary driving instincts into technical language, has reportedly been excluded from parts of sensitive engineering discussions as his expected future departure approaches. If accurate, that changes everything. Lambiase isn't simply the man speaking over the radio. He's the interpreter between Verstappen and the entire technical department. Reduce his influence, and suddenly the driver's feedback has to travel through more filters before reaching decision makers. Every additional layer creates delay. Every delay creates misunderstanding. And misunderstanding at 320 km per hour becomes performance loss. Now compare that culture with McLaren. Andrea Stella has built an engineering structure where drivers, aerodynamicists and strategy departments appear remarkably aligned. When Lando Norris or Oscar Piastri identifies a weakness, upgrades are increasingly designed around solving exactly that limitation rather than protecting previous concepts. That's why McLaren's development curve has continued climbing while Red Bull's has become increasingly unpredictable. One organisation seems to be simplifying communication. The other appears to be complicating it. And in Formula One, simplicity often wins championships. Now let's talk about the contract clause, because this is where engineering failure suddenly becomes political leverage. According to widespread reports, Verstappen's agreement allows him to leave for 2027 if he is outside the top two in the Drivers' Championship by the summer break. Following Silverstone, he sits 78 points behind second place and more than 100 behind the championship leader. With only Belgium and Hungary remaining before the shutdown, even maximum points cannot mathematically rescue that position. In other words, this is no longer speculation. It is arithmetic that changes every conversation taking place inside Milton Keynes. Red Bull reportedly asked Verstappen to give assurances about his long-term commitment, believing stability would help attract engineers during one of the most competitive recruitment battles in Formula One. There were even reports that the team explored buying out the escape clause itself, effectively paying to remove Verstappen's option to walk away. His answer? No guarantee, no commitment, no promise. That silence may have spoken louder than any press conference. From Verstappen's perspective, the logic is brutally simple. Formula One careers are short. 4 world championships don't guarantee a 5th. Loyalty is valuable, but only when the machinery underneath you still deserves it. That's why former drivers keep repeating one word: ruthless. Because history rarely rewards sentiment. Look across the paddock. McLaren has transformed itself into arguably the most stable technical organisation under the current regulations. Their aerodynamic platform continues to produce predictable balance. Their tyre management remains among the strongest on the grid, and perhaps most importantly, the internal atmosphere appears calm even under championship pressure. Compare that with Red Bull. A brain drain following Adrian Newey's departure. Leadership changes after Christian Horner's exit. questions surrounding technical direction, recurring reliability concerns, and a driver openly questioning engineering decisions. Those aren't isolated headlines. They're connected pieces of the same puzzle. Then comes another technical problem most fans never hear about: energy management. Laurent Mekies admitted that circuits demanding heavy electrical deployment, such as Silverstone and potentially Spa-Francorchamps, continue exposing weaknesses in Red Bull Ford's power unit package. Ironically, Red Bull currently ranks strongly in internal combustion engine performance, but appears to trail rivals on the electrical deployment side. That creates an extraordinary regulatory trap. Because of Formula One's development token system, being competitive in one area limits how aggressively the manufacturer can upgrade another. Red Bull may know exactly where the weakness lies, yet still be unable to introduce the hardware required to eliminate it quickly. It's almost like winning half the battle, only to discover the rules prevent you from reinforcing the other half. Now listen carefully to Verstappen's sarcasm when discussing Spa. Spa and Monza are going to be great. Everyone understood what he really meant. Spa is one of his favourite circuits, yet instead of excitement he sounded resigned. Drivers usually fear rivals. Verstappen appears to fear his own package, and that's an astonishing sentence to say about a four-time world champion. If Verstappen eventually leaves, Red Bull doesn't just lose its fastest driver, it loses the reference point around which the entire technical philosophy has evolved for years. Engineers develop differently when the benchmark disappears. Sponsors reassess confidence. Future recruits ask harder questions. Rivals smell vulnerability. At exactly the same moment, whichever team signs Verstappen doesn't merely gain extraordinary speed. It gains belief. Belief inside a Formula One factory spreads faster than any aerodynamic upgrade. One signature could completely redraw the competitive map of the next regulation cycle. If Max Verstappen really walks away in 2027, history may remember Silverstone not as the race where Red Bull lost points, but as the weekend they lost their greatest asset. So what do you think? Is Verstappen making the smartest move of his career, or would leaving Red Bull be a massive mistake? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more deep dive Formula One investigations.